YouTube, it has been a while since we have watched an Ashikai video, and this popped up on my feed. The power of space, a Genshin Impact theory. Let's get into this. Sorry for the tank top. It's really warm today, especially for Europeans. I hope you're surviving. Let's get into this. This is probably going to be about the Temple of Space from what I can see and more.
To say the Temple of Space is jam-packed with fascinating snippets of lore and references would be quite the understatement.
Indeed.
You can, after all, find something of interest basically anywhere you look, and we went over a lot of them in part 1 of this series. And
the Temple trivia.
Yet, despite all that, the temple's master is conspicuously absent. And
Indeed.
It's not just her physical appearance that's absent either. Apart from the temple's residents confirming that Asmoday disappeared hundreds of years ago without explanation, there's a distinct lack of any explicit information about her to be found anywhere in the temple. But there is a lot of implicit information about her here.
I feel like that's all we get recently about Asmoday. It is a lot of implicit information, but she's basically been scrubbed from the annals at this point, right? There was that one book as well in Nodcry, I think during the Lauma meet and greet. Not a meet and greet, but you know what I mean. Meeting point, that's the one. Which basically had all of the shades. Yeah, Hymns of the Far North. It had all of the shades and stuff, and then she was just not anywhere to be seen.
Stuff that's a little bit harder to put together because it's scattered and fragmented in ways that make the connections between them difficult to see. But lucky for you, consolidating this massive disjointed intel is what I've been up to lately.
Nice.
And in this video, I'm gonna put all my collected puzzle pieces together so that we can learn more about this mysterious shade of space, Asmoday.
I'm excited,
now, this video
dude.
is technically part 2 in my Temple of Space series, and while we spent part 1 covering each temple area in turn, I can't really do the same thing with part 2 because the remaining areas like the memory core, apathic interval, and the cage of suchness are far too interconnected to talk about them independently. So instead of doing that, we're going to start by talking about the Temple of Space's residents and mechanics, which will tell us more about what the power of space really is.
Ooh, I'm actually very excited for her to go through. Hell yeah. Boken to Boken. I'm very excited for her to talk about the residents of the Temple of Space, to be honest. One thing you'll notice is I go into these videos expecting to learn. I don't go into these reactions to Ashikai especially expecting to know what she's going to be talking about because I basically never do. When it comes to like Minsleaf reacts and even Arnold, right, when they get a lot of their knowledge and information from the game itself, Ashikai kind of goes a totally different direction with her theories most of the time, and it's a lot of things outside of the game, and I never know where she's going to go with it, so you will notice I don't yap a lot until we get further into this, just so you know.
And from there, we'll be able to take a closer look at Asmoday herself, including the reason why she chose to serve a new master. Now it is time for me to spend way too much time talking about Asmoday and her power of space. But before we can get to that, we're going to have to start off with some very basic background information on the Temple of Space.
Okay.
So, without further ado, let's get right into it.
Let's do it.
Originally, the Temple of Space was a
Did you say segment domain?
very simple stone structure located north of Dornman Port. It was a companion temple to the Temple of Time, which was built nearby.
Yep.
While both temples were built to honor the shades of space and time respectively, Asmoday at least rarely, if ever, made an appearance there herself. But when disaster swept through the region then known as Arcadia, Asmoday finally turned her gaze towards the temple and raised it to the heavens where it could no longer be reached through normal means.
Gosh, she's
now,
so
this
cool.
is just conjecture, but it doesn't seem like she just lifted the buildings into the sky.
I like to think she did. You know, like Shenhe lifted that big ass rock, bro. I like to think she did.
As is. It seems far more likely that she put the entire temple in a box for safekeeping and then put that box in the sky.
Probably.
Reason being is that this place is pretty cut off from the rest of the world. Entering or exiting the temple is very restrictive and difficult, and some rules of reality just don't apply within that space.
Yep.
Like, you know, the flow of time. That means nothing within the temple can
Space abides no reason, baby.
erode or degrade, so the living residents of the temple cannot age, get hungry, or even sleep. Those things are a factor of time. Now, you may recall from the Shades teaser that Asmoday actually has a lot of these boxed spaces in her collection. In the teaser, the other 3 Shades spent time traveling through each of them looking for her. And again, this is just conjecture, but because there are so many, I think they probably have a categorization or labeling system. And that's where I think the name segment domain Tau came from.
Oh, that's very interesting. I've never thought about it like that, actually. It's really cool. I did understand that all of these different cubes were indeed going to be different domains in different worlds, which, to be fair, it does really make me think that Teyvat is just one of them. There's nothing saying there can't be a world inside of a world or a cube inside of a cube, for example, right? Cubes get used so much in Genshin, even with Nicole, right? When she's building stuff, the building blocks of her things are blocks. Similanka as well, the building blocks. It's an interesting thought experiment, especially with Asmoday, because there is just so many of them. And if you look at the very beginning of the game, I mean, we get cubed at the end of the day. That is what happens.
Now, unlike the other boxed space that we saw in the teaser.
Also, there was also, if I remember correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but this was a major lore drop, if I'm right, in Sumeru, right? With Dunyazad, I think it was. When we met Nahida and stuff and we learned about kind of bubble spaces, bubble worlds, right? Is that when it was first brought into question? Yes, the one where the traveler tried to escape the samsara, right? But it was dreams? Dream worlds, yeah, well... dreams and stories. I remember there being circles. Yes, you're right, but I mean, let's take a look at Dottoro's experiments in Not Cry, right? Circles. Let's take a look at Teyvat itself and the full sky around Teyvat. Doesn't mean it still can't be in a cube. You've got to think, right? Who's saying that Teyvat isn't just one little false firmament inside of one big cube, and there's many more, and that big cube is the real universe, right? That's what I'm thinking.
Segment Domain Tau isn't just a space containing a moment of time. It's a...
That's right, in the square hole. Where does the circle world go? That's right, into the square world.
And up next, a cylinder.
The circle.
I think that goes in
The circle.
the square hole.
a massive, eternal space full of living memories collected from every era. It's a living exhibit of Teyvat's history, complete with the people representing every civilization and era, and custom angelic watchers to take care of them. That makes this space very unique.
True.
Now, the only reason I went over this very obvious stuff about the temple that you probably already knew is so that I could have an excuse to ask you one very important question.
Go ahead.
Why did Asmoday decide to turn this neglected temple into a civilization conservation project in the first place?
Because I think she has the same kind of goal, or had the same kind of mission as us, the Traveler. That was my expectation. I really thought she was the previous witness, although much more powerful, of course, but I think she had the same idea to basically map out everything that was currently in Teyvat the way that it was and keep them as little pocket dimensions in this place, just in case, like as a failsafe, right? What if Teyvat was blown up or something in the past, and this was the only memory of Teyvat left to reconstruct it with, for example, to start another Samsara cycle or something like that. That was what I thought, anyway. I thought she was going on her own little journey and then she got corrupted by the end.
Because you gotta admit, it's kind of weird that this place even exists.
Yep.
It's almost like Asmoday wants a backup of all the information and people in Teyvat just in case some massive disaster in the future happens.
Let me cook, bro. Let me cook. This is exactly what I said as we were playing through this quest, by the way. Go watch the playthrough. It's a great playthrough.
Speaking of which, the disaster that caused Asmoday to save the Temple of Space is never explicitly named anywhere in the quest or anywhere I could find, but based on contextual clues, it was likely the War of Funerary Flame.
Yeah.
The first and most important piece of information that supports this idea has to do with the order in which people were uplifted into the temple, because they appear to be uplifted chronologically. Case in point, Astoria was among the first people to be uplifted into the temple, and he hailed from the era of angels and witnessed Nibelung's return during the War of Funerary Flame. So unless you want to argue that she can just uplift anyone from any moment in time, it makes sense that the temple would have been uplifted at or around the time the first people were also uplifted.
Okay,
which
I like
in
that.
this case is the War of Funerary Flame.
Yeah.
And the Funerary War certainly does fit the definition of a disaster because it destroyed many civilizations and even the moons. So it really does seem like the perfect catalyst for Asmoday to attempt to save what little she could of the world and humanity.
Yeah.
But when you put it like that, it kind of sounds like Asmoday decided to make an arc.
Yep. I love where this is going. I'm actually very surprised this is where it's going, actually, to be honest. These are the same thoughts that we had during the quest.
Of sorts, right?
I'm assuming Ashika is going to go, well, no, actually, she didn't. Then go on to blow my mind.
A heavenly apocalypse bunker from which civilization could be rebuilt if the worst case scenario were to come to pass. And that's really interesting to me because while the War of Funerary Flame isn't described as a flood per se, the book Before Sun and Moon does describe those events under headlines that explicitly reference the events of the Great Flood in Genesis. You know, the one about Noah's Ark.
Yep.
So humor me for a moment while I conflate Noah's Ark with the Temple of Space.
Oh, hell yeah. Okay, this is what I'm excited for because yes, this is the theory that I had, but for me, it's very surface level. I always associate my own theories with stuff in the game. I never go outside of the game, guys. I don't think about Noah's Ark specifically. I just think of it as an ark and base it on, again, things that we've learned of in the game. Very excited for this. Let's go.
While we know the cause of the War of Funerary Flame, a cause for the Genesis flood is never really given in the biblical canon. It just says, and I'm paraphrasing here, that God was displeased with mankind and wanted to wash the world clean of sin and start over. But the biblical canon never really describes a specific big event or monumental sin that would trigger or even justify this kind of extreme reaction from a deity. There is, however, a very detailed exposition on the cause of the flood found in the apocryphal Book of Enoch. The first Book of Enoch, which is the only one we're going to be talking about today,
Quick question. Book of Enoch is in the game or in real life?
starts out by talking about a group of angels called the Watchers who decided to descend to Earth and take human wives.
Wait, IRL? Okay, never mind. Jesus. Okay. Okay. Let her cook. Okay, carry on.
So that they could have children. These
Sorry.
who decided to descend to Earth and take human wives so that they could have children. These half-human, half-angel children were called the Nephilim, and God kind of hated them. He also hated the fact that the Watchers taught mankind all manner of things like herbalism and metalwork, fashion, astrology. All of this stuff was basically considered forbidden knowledge, if you will. So God really hated the Nephilim, and he also did not like the fact that this information from the Watchers was spreading throughout mankind. These things were not part of God's plans. So God decided to just wipe the world clean and start over. And that's how we got the Genesis flood and also the story of Noah's Ark.
Jesus.
Noah was considered a very virtuous man, so God trusted him with repopulating the world after he wiped it clean. Now, obviously, I'm oversimplifying the story and leaving out a lot of the details.
Of course.
But these main points are kind of all we need to start drawing some really interesting parallels between the story told in 1st Enoch and what happened with the Temple of Space. As far as I'm concerned, these parallels are not coincidental. I think that Hoyo is referencing Enoch explicitly and deliberately, and I think by the end of this, you'll agree with me.
Well, I already do agree, to be fair, but I think it's also to parallel what the Traveler is currently going through and what the end goal actually is, because a lot of people still think the end goal is literally just to find our sister, right? I really don't think it is. I also don't think it's to overthrow the heavenly principles necessarily. I think the actual end goal is indeed to help the Fatui achieve their goals. It sounds crazy, dude, but I really do think like the whole burn the old world to start a new one is likely what's going to end up happening. Not necessarily by getting rid of Tevat, I'm not saying that, but I do think we will take the throne in the sky, as is said in the Traveler's character story, to a certain extent. I really do think Asmoday's journey of being a witness, like Zhongli said to us, right? Our job is to witness. It's to remember things. It's to travel through Tevat and see everything as it is. I said a couple of updates ago when we had the Hexen Circle event where we go into these different pocket worlds, bubble worlds, it felt like Alice was testing us, because in these worlds, we started our story again with tiny little changes. I felt like that was a test from the Hexen Circle, being like, is the Traveler doing good enough? Is this Descender the one? The ship obviously came with the genetic data bank as well, quite similar to what we see up here with all the people up there. Now we're going to the moon in the next update, which also has a conservation area. There's also, don't forget this, I said the other day, did they use our ship to like update everything that was on the moon so quickly? And people were like, well, probably not. But then they do have teleport waypoints up there. Some of them might be different based on the icons, but they do have teleport waypoints up there. We need to see the update first to be able to see, of course. But I do think everything is going to come together very nicely. By the end of Snezhnaya, I think we're going to get a lot of answers next patch, to be honest, when we actually go to the moon and hopefully the dark side of the moon and see where the shades are residing. I really do think they're going to be there. Let's continue.
According to the Little Witch and the Undying Fire, Tevat was also originally populated by the Nephilim. But the book also implies that this is no longer the case. Like, the Nephilim aren't around in great number.
The waypoint in the moon is very ancient compared to the Tevat one. Based on what we saw one. And coincidentally, when they opened the map later in the live stream, there is one waypoint that looks different. It could be that one. We haven't seen the rest, to be fair. We'll see, though. That's why I say we'll have to wait.
Also implies that this is no longer the case. Like, the Nephilim aren't around in great number anymore.
Okay.
So we can assume that this race must have been around during the pre-War of Funerary Flame era.
Hyperborea.
In the same way that the biblical Nephilim were around during the pre-Flood era.
Yep.
And in the same way God wanted the Nephilim gone, the heavenly principles also probably wanted them gone. My hypothesis is that they were probably dragons of some sort, which really doesn't narrow things down very much because technically speaking, angels are also dragons.
Ha ha ha! Cook.
Thank you, Nicole, for the established lore. Although with that in mind, I do wonder if the angels actually qualify as the Nephilim in this case, because they are obviously of dragon origin, but they have humanoid shapes, which kind of makes them like half human, half dragon-ish, which would match the whole half angel, half human Nephilim from the Bible.
That's a good point.
I honestly don't know. Anyway, the point is what destroyed the Nephilim in both cases was a great disaster, a flood in the Bible, and a war in Tevat, which may have actually been flood-related if you think of the abyss as flooding Tevat, but that's...
Oh my god, that reminds me of Halo, bro, with the flood.
This disaster was also likely what caused Asmoday to turn the Temple of Space into a sort of ark, like Noah's Ark.
Cool.
And this becomes quite intriguing once you learn more about Enoch himself. Because Enoch isn't just the name of the book, it's the name of a guy in the book. In fact, it's the name of the guy who presumably wrote the book as a first...
I can't wait until we meet Genshin Impact. I really can't wait. Bro, that's gonna be crazy.
And account of what he witnessed. And Enoch was a scribe by trade who hailed from the pre-flood era and was also the great-great-great-grandfather of Noah.
Jesus.
Now, I know this description will probably make you think of someone like Historia, since he's a scribe from the equivalent of the pre-flood era, and I think that's a valid connection to make. The problem is that although Enoch did ascend to heaven, in a similar way to how Historia was uplifted into the Temple of Space, Historia never actually achieved divinity, whereas Enoch did. According to some texts, Enoch actually became an archangel by the name of Metatron. And Metatron is kind of like God's second in command in a lot of ways.
I thought it was a transformer.
He attends God's throne and executes his will directly, while also recording all of the deeds of man. A callback to his time as a scribe on Earth. Now, in some texts, God made Metatron chief of the archangels.
God
and
damn.
in others, Metatron is actually conflated with the archangel Michael himself. Seems like a superfluous detail, except that in Genshin, the archangels are actually literally the four shades. I made a theory about this ages ago where I decrypted Mona's scryglass.
Dude, I remember that. That was a good-ass theory, dude. That was a long time ago, though.
Pointing out that each cardinal direction actually referred to one of the four archangels. Raphael
said apart from that, nothing else aged well. But they don't have to age well. The video was still banger. Theories are still good even if they don't age well, right?
Uriel, Gabriel, and Michael. And now that Nicole has recently proved the four shades are archangels by calling Istaroth an archangel in her voice line about Zabai, and I can now draw a line between Asmoday and Enoch and Metatron, I would therefore like to submit the idea that Asmoday is supposed to be Metatron. Because not only is Asmoday part of the archangels, but she is also the sustainer of the heavenly principles. So she'd be fulfilling the same role as Metatron, who carries out God's decrees. And following a great disaster, she created an ark, a means to conserve the memories of life, just like Noah did, and just like the scribe Enoch and Metatron would do. Oh, and also the attendants of her ark are the Watchers. Now, this alone would be a...
Well, I think that's also in reference to her being a witness, right? I really hope there's some lore that kind of ties Asmoday with Paimon. Not in the super obvious way that, like, oh my god, Paimon is just Asmoday. I kind of do like the theory that she is a segment of Asmoday's soul, kind of like the, you know, the splitting in three and stuff. But either way, I just hope there's something. I honestly don't know when we'll get more Asmodee lore, to be honest. I feel like that's not going to come until, like, the very end of the game now. I really do feel like Snezhnaya is going to be very focused on Nibelung. I know I kind of joked about it earlier, saying, like, Genshin, when we're going to meet Genshin Impact, but out of everybody, wouldn't Nibelung be the Genshin Impact that we would meet eventually? Genshin means original god, and when you think about it, with the information that we know now, would Nibelung not technically be the original god? Closest thing that we could come to right now is probably him.
Pretty cool series of little references. Just some fun little factoids to talk about. But I can't be the only one who was wondering why Hoyoverse would even want to associate Asmodee with Metatron in the first place.
True. Paimonia. Well, I think Paimon is going to have something to do with Project Moongazer, to be honest, but we'll see about that in a couple of weeks.
So after thinking about it a little bit, I think the reason for this association is twofold. Firstly, Metatron is called Lesser Yahweh, and in some views, albeit heretical, Metatron was considered the other half of the dual powers ruling heaven theory. This theory is found in a passage of the Talmud where someone encounters Metatron and wonders if he and God actually shared power together, since Metatron was allowed to sit on God's throne. But rather than say God and Metatron split power equally or co-rule the world or something, The title of Lesser Yahweh is likely more a reference to how Metatron was the executor of God's will. This is why in some branches of the Kabbalah, especially in Theosophy, the very first Sephiroth was said to be occupied by Metatron.
Sephiroth.
This Sephiroth, Keter, or the crown, is supposed to be the place at which all of God's light originates from. Consider it the equivalent of the throne of God.
Yeah.
From his position on God's throne, Metatron takes God's light and filters it down through the other Sephiroth of the Tree of Life, thus forming reality. Now, it appears as though Asmoday's power, like the Theosophic Metatron, is one that shapes reality. I'm going to talk about why this is.
Ooh. Shapes reality? Yeah, I could see that, to be fair. If you think about reality as these different worlds and different bubbles, then I can definitely see it. I mean, the four shades have a lot to do with each of them, right? I would imagine Asmodee, yes, is the one that shapes it. Easteroth is the one that determines how long it lasts, or how long the things inside it last, of course, with time, or at least measures it. And then, obviously, we have the ruler of death, Renova, who cuts those strings, I guess. And then Nibirius, who can actually grant them life. Although I don't know if she'd fucking choose to do that at this point now, being 50-50 on it, you know?
And how I got there and how it works in a minute, but for now, let me introduce you to Metatron's cube. Now, before anyone gets mad at me, let me add a quick disclaimer before I explain why I'm showing you this.
Oh, okay.
First off, I want to recognize that this shape in particular, under the name of Metatron's cube, basically exists as a part of sacred geometry and isn't technically part of any sort of formalized religion.
I feel like we've seen this before in an Ashikai video, no? Maybe not the hexagon in the middle, but the circles. I don't know, I feel like I've seen it.
Is religion. This shape does, however, appear in the Sefer Yetzirah, but not under the name of Metatron's cube. As far as I know, it's unlabeled. And look, I have scrubbed the bowels of the internet looking for an origin story for this thing. Okay. But because this Metatron cube symbol is so pervasive and prolific throughout the New Age space, I literally cannot find a reputable source for its origins.
Fair enough.
If you know where it actually came from, let me know, because the only reputable roots I can find tie back to the 13th century mathematician Fibonacci, and I don't have a source for that.
The sequence?
So, allegedly, Fibonacci named this shape after Metatron because it contains all 5 platonic solids, which are these 3D objects on screen right now. Now, each platonic solid corresponds with one of the 4 classical elements, earth, air, water, and fire, plus one more to represent the ether. Now, to Platonists, these platonic solids and the classical elements were the building blocks of the universe. In other words, they are the
God bless Simulanka, baby.
basis for constructing reality, which is what Metatron does, hence Metatron's cube. Now, while I'm uncertain about the story of Fibonacci being true, when you translate the Metatron's cube into 3D, it does in fact contain all of the platonic solids, so at least that part is true. And I don't think being a part of popular culture or sacred geometry really precludes this symbol from being referenced by Hoyoverse.
Wait, so everybody inside Tevat is actually just platonic? Damn.
I'm gonna roll with it, especially because this shape should be really familiar to you.
Simulanka?
It's technically a stellated octahedron, and we see these throughout Genshin in various configurations. In Genshin, this is the shape of a star, and in both Genshin and the real world, everything is made of stardust. And that's kind of a cool thing about Metatron's cube. It's a shape that contains the building blocks of literally every other shape in this.
Dude, I've never thought of it like that. That is so interesting. Well, because I never knew about it, to be fair, but that is very interesting.
Same way that a star contains all of the materials to make any other thing that exists within the universe. And now that you have this context, I think it's time I explained why this power over form, this power to shape reality, is the power of space.
Shapelessness? Oh, we're getting into some weird, fabulously strange territory right now. Okay, let's go.
In the same way Platonists believe the classical elements are the building blocks of reality, the 7 elements of Tevat serve as the building blocks of Tevat. You can kind of think of them as Lego bricks. Small.
It's really funny that the Saritsa isn't eternity or related to Asmodee, considering freezing things in place is like preserving or keeping them for eternity. Well, you kind of answered your own question. We already have eternity with Raiden Shogun, right? She was the ideals of eternity. We don't know that she's not really related to Asmodee, to be fair, but instead of eternity, she is indeed like preservation.
Uniform shapes waiting to be arranged and assembled into a more complex shape. And it's these complex shapes that we recognize as the material world. Asmodee's temple puts this idea on full display, as many of the exhibits within require elemental cubes to be collected and arranged within a display case for the true form of the exhibit to be revealed. Now, since the 7 elements in Genshin equate to the different colors in the visible light spectrum, something like a white light emitted by a star should, in theory, contain all of the elements.
True.
And if elements are the basis to produce every form in existence, and a star's light contains all elements, then a star's light also contains the potential to create any form. So you can argue that it's a form that contains all other forms, just like a Metatron star. This also lines up with the theosophic Metatron, who effectively splits and shapes the light of God to form reality. And because you can use the elements found within a star to make anything within reality, a star becomes the most simplistic but holistic representation of the universe itself.
That's so cool, dude. You know, I'm surprised I'm actually following along up with all this. But
now, this
it
is
does
hardly
make
a
sense.
respectable body of evidence to try and prove that the power of space is the power to shape reality. So what else could we use? Well, let's take another look at Asmoday's title, The Shade of Space.
Yeah.
Because see, space isn't just about space-time vectors or directionality.
It's about physically occupying something
also
as well.
about emptiness, the space within which something exists.
Exactly.
And that is why the original Chinese text calls space a void, which is synonymous with like the vast expanse of empty outer space.
Who was the Hersher of the Void in Honkai Impact 3rd? Quick question. It was Kiana? Oh.
The emptiness matters here. Now, Asmodee and her watchers reside in the cage of suchness, which you can only really reach by passing through the corridor of nothingness. Nothingness is pretty easy to connect
Corridor of Nothingness. No, never mind. Sorry. Okay, never mind. I got conflated with Nothing Passage.
to emptiness,
fine.
obviously. But suchness is the real point of interest here because it's a reference to the Buddhist concept of tathata, which is sometimes translated into English as true suchness or emptiness. But tathata is also what we call the ultimate reality or the true reality of all phenomena, or simply the reality realm. And it is really difficult to explain this concept, and I am no expert on Buddhism, but for our purposes, you can kind of think of it like a realm or a state of being in which nothing and everything exists at the same time because
Jesus.
a thing is everything it's ever experienced.
And just like that, I'm lost. Sorry. One more time?
Think of it like a realm or a state of being in which nothing and everything exists at the same time because a thing is everything it's ever experienced, both its creation and its destruction, and everything in between those 2 points.
Okay.
So the tathata of an object or a person is its totality or entirety of its existence. To put it another way, if you took the beginning, middle, and end of a story and confined it within the boundaries of paper and leather, then the resulting book that contains all of the story would be the tathata equivalent.
Oh, I see. Okay. If Teva is a cube, they're basically saying that everything inside the cube is the equivalent. It houses the beginning, the middle, and the end, I guess, if everything gets erased from the cube.
At least that's how I understand the concept.
Okay.
I know I'm missing a lot of nuance here, but I'm kind of going for a broader understanding of this topic because it's very complex and I am, again, no expert. Now,
Okay.
if you had any doubt that suchness was referring to tathata, the Chinese name for this area is actually the cage of neither existence nor non-existence, which is literally tathata, the ultimate reality. It's the totality of the concept, before, during, and after it exists. Now, as far as I can tell, the philosophy of tathata is generally associated with the teachings of Nagarjuna, or at the very least, he's the one who's most famous for them. And
Okay.
Hoyo makes references to Nagarjuna and his writings a bunch of times throughout the game. Nagarjuna's Bodhicitta Vivarana text is actually pretty easy to digest if you want to read more about how emptiness is totality, so I'll leave a link to an online copy for you in the description. In any
Thanks.
case, you can see references to this type of philosophy throughout the Temple of Space.
I'm losing it, bro.
And it's deeply tied to these themes of emptiness, which is related to the concept of space. Hence why I'm saying this ultimate reality power is related to the power of space that Asmodee wields.
Okay.
Now, if something enters a state of emptiness or formlessness, which is another way you can say it, they technically enter a state of potential because when a form is abandoned, what's left is its myriad parts. It's kind of how like the exhibits in the temple were disassembled and then turned into elemental blocks. Those are the myriad parts.
I get
Those
that.
blocks or pieces have forgotten the form they're supposed to make up. And that's
That
where
happens to me sometimes, bro, especially when I just wake up.
the hypostasis come in.
Oh, dear God, what are we doing?
So these bosses are described in-game as life forms that have completely abandoned their former appearance, allowing them to reach the highest level of elemental purity. In other words, they are the result of something that has lost its form and therefore has regressed into its elemental building blocks.
I see.
Which makes sense because in philosophy, hypostasis is what we call the underlying substance that supports reality. And in Tevat, the stuff that makes up reality is...
Bro, I didn't know the electrohypostasis was called Aleph. Fuck that cube, bro. Took everything from us.
Underlying substance that supports reality. And in Tevat, the stuff that makes up reality is elemental energy. In Chinese, however, the hypostasis are actually called wuxing, which refers to the Buddhist concept of animita. That's when an entity lacks distinguishing characteristics or a discernible form. Essentially, it's a reflection of an entity's true nature and is thus related to the concept of tathata or emptiness we talked about earlier.
Oh, that's cool.
Fittingly, hypostasis generally appear wherever there's a high density of elemental energy or in places where the ley lines have clogged. And this is of interest to me specifically because ley lines carry both elemental energy and memories. And I think the reason why elemental energy enters a state of formlessness,
because it's lost its memories,
is because it lacks memory.
Wow! Wait, that's really cool. Oh my god. Sorry, I'm learning along with y'all for this one, bro.
Throughout the Temple of Space, you'll find memory factors, which can be offered up to the memory core in the central pillar area. Not only are both the memory factors and the memory core cubic, like the elemental building blocks, but the description of the memory factors even calls them building blocks. But not building blocks of matter, building blocks of civilization. Now, I think when it comes to an act of creation, memory would play the role of a blueprint or a set of instructions that the creator would use to shape raw elemental material into a specific form. So combining the blueprint of memory with the material building blocks of elemental energy, you can create a material object.
Dude, could it just be... Oh, this is going to sound so strange, but this is really making me think about the whole cube theory in general. If we are really just inside one of Asmoday's cubes, or even just a cube in general, right? Are the red cubes just the same thing? Are they just formless because they've lost memory and that's why we're kind of the witness so we can restore that or something or create something new? I don't know. Like, what is the purpose of our journey? Is it to restore the elemental authority to the land through the statues of this? What is it? What are we doing? What the fuck is the traveler doing here other than witnessing everything? Why? What is our journey? What's our plan? This does make a lot of sense, especially when you look at these. That is very interesting. God damn. Damn, this is really making me think now.
That's exactly what happens when we gather all the memory factors. Those memory fragments interact with the elemental energy and new material exhibits are built based on those memory fragments. So I think the reason why there's a memory core in the central pillar area is because the most important thing Asmodee needs to preserve is the memories of a lost civilization. Cause like, elemental energy is everywhere in Tevat. So long as she has a memory blueprint to work with, she should be able to use any kind of elemental energy to build something recognizable from those blueprints.
Okay, do y'all think there is a possibility that Piero struck a deal with Renova? Because remember we saw the cataclysm that Renova brought down upon Cambria and Piero was just stood there looking up at her, looking very kind of pissed off, of course, right? I don't know, bro. I don't know. I don't think anything is that far-fetched at this point, bro. Not when we found out fucking everything came from literal fucking dragons and the Heavenly Principles took over everything. They colonized those bitches. Because it's just curious to me why Renova just let him just chill after that, you know? It is curious to me. We're obviously going to learn that in Snezhnaya and see what the deal is there, of course, but I am just curious.
So it's the memories that are fragile and rare and desperately need to be preserved. And that's why the memory core at the center of the temple is also called the heart of the world. It's the most crucial element. And this is how I arrived at the conclusion that the power of space is the power to shape reality by ordering formless elemental energy with the memory of a given form. To think of it this way, you may be inclined to call Asmodee a potter. Because if elements are like soil and memory is water and mixing the two produces a sort of malleable clay from which infinite forms can be made, then that might explain why the Temple of Space is called Segment Domain Tao.
True.
Tao in Chinese means pottery. So the way I see it, this is a reference to how God created the first man from clay. I mean, even his name, Adam, comes from Adama, or soil, in reference to this event. So this temple of space is serving as an arc of humanity specifically. Now in fairness, Tau can also represent the Hebrew letter of the same name, which carries the meaning of truth, or the Greek letter of the same name, which represents life. Personally, I choose to believe this name is supposed to reference all of these things because creating the ultimate reality or true reality is what I think Asmoday is supposed to do, or at least supposed to manage. And the angel I've been associating her with is Metatron, who is also called the Angel of Life.
I can't unhear Megatron, bro. I'm so sorry.
It's the Tree of Life. Now, I know this kind of makes Asmoday's abilities sound a little too similar to the Shade of Life, but the two have some very important differences. For starters, I'm arguing that space powers govern all shapes, not just those of the living. And also, just because Asmodee could make something
I like that. So hold on, because I do want to get this straight. So she's basically saying that Asmodee governs all shapes. So basically it's like Durin's mom. She is the one that gives the idea and creates everything, a whole story, a whole Simulanka, for example, all the building blocks. And then I guess the Shade of Life, Nibirius, would be the magic that is bringing the life forms to life. Interesting. Okay.
All shapes, not just those of the living. And also, just because Asmodee could make something human-shaped doesn't mean it would be alive. Just as God had to infuse his clay atom with the spark or breath of life, so too would Asmodee need to have life breathed into her human-shaped creation.
Okay, I vibe with that. That makes sense.
This is likely why it's so important for the Temple of Space to be populated by living individuals that are held in stasis. Recreating shapes is pretty easy, but bringing it to life probably isn't something Asmodee can do. Not even in the case of her Watchers.
True.
Her Watchers are technically mechanical life forms. They're not alive in the same way people are. So it's the more spiritual, biologic side of life that I think the Shade of Life governs over. Which is not to say that Rhine-Daughter or Nibirius can't also shape things. I think they're just limited to living things. Besides, we know that Rhine-Daughter at least made a lot of experimental life forms out of abyssal material that she called humus, which is named after a type of soil.
Of course.
So that's another pottery or clay reference. In any case, I don't actually think the boundaries between the Shade's powers...
Is it? Wait, somebody enlighten me here.
...called humus, which is named after a type of soil.
Is clay classified as a type of soil? Yes? Oh my god. I guess I've never really thought about it. As a civil engineer, yes. Well, as a RuneScape player, wouldn't it be ore?
So that's another pottery or clay reference. In any case, I don't actually think the boundaries between the Shade's powers are very clear-cut. I think they're a bit blurry. Because, even though Renova governs over death, she can also grant people...
This is the scene I'm talking about, by the way. Holy fucking aura farm!
...eternal life and resurrect them when they die, which kind of feels like it treads into Rhine-Daughter's territory.
True.
So I'm not really gonna fuss about how and where these Shade powers overlap. I mean, their powers do come from a single split authority, so it makes sense to me if the boundaries are a little wonky.
That makes sense.
That said, it does seem like a lot of this overlap occurs wherever memories are involved. Asmodee uses memory for blueprints, Istaroth keeps memories as recorded history, Rhine-Daughter probably works with the stuff like genetic memory, and Renova wipes memories. Part of me does wonder if this memory overlap here is meant to reference how digital Tevat is feeling these days. Because no matter what the system process is within a computer, they all have to touch memory at some point, you know? Anyway, that makes
true. Oh god, hey, speaking about memories and computers, bro, I don't want to hear about it anymore, bro. All I've heard for the past few days is RAM again.
Simply wraps up my thoughts on the power of space and Asmodee's responsibilities. So
I like that section. I actually think that was very informative. Asmodee's melancholy. Vera's melancholy time, bro. Oh, we about to lock the fuck in.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about what we learned about Asmodee as a person. Because, and this might surprise you, I have a theory about her.
Oh, interesting. Oh, she's Vera?
One of the most pervasive and least talked about themes within the Temple of Space is the theme of melancholy.
Oh god.
Many of the references I went over in part 1 focus on the concept of melancholy. The final volumes of Vera's melancholy are found here. The people trapped within the temple are in a constant battle against melancholy. Melanta himself suffers from it, and even the story of Lind and Hilda focuses on the struggle against melancholy.
Everybody's sad.
Historia...
Every single person in I don't know a single happy person in Genshin, deadass. Even Ito can't beat anybody in battles and stuff, and he's like one of the happiest guys in the game.
Explains that the reason why Asmodee named her two Watchers, Nyalita
Yoimiya? Okay, fair enough.
and Melanta, is because they represented the two feelings that
Klee? She's in solitary, bro. Sorry, let me
Two
continue.
watchers, Nyalita and Malanta, is
Yes.
because they represented the two feelings that she struggled with the most: nihilism
Nothingness and sadness.
melancholy.
Wow.
Which means Asmoday likely suffers from depression, or
Damn, real.
at least did for a long time. Perhaps since the War of Funerary Flame, since that kind of lines up with the moment her attitude seems to have changed. And this idea is more important than you might think, because as Malanta says, if a god suffers from depression, their options are limited. There's no god therapist to talk to, no god doctor to get medication from, so the only options left are to either suffer in silence or attempt to carve out the part of them that causes the melancholy in the first place.
Jesus,
Which
what?
does come with its own set of problems like weakness or instability. And I would like to point out that the keeper, or rather the sustainer, mentioned in the Traveler's character story, is fading. So it's possible that this is exactly what Asmoday did. She may have carved out a piece of herself so that she could grow numb to the melancholy, and in doing so, she's made herself a little bit unstable. I know.
Bro, that's actually so interesting. I guess it would kind of line up, right? But then, where's the remaining part, though? Because I don't think it'd just disperse. I don't think it'd just disappear. And I don't think it's Paimon. Or maybe she's just not freaking depressed yet. I don't know.
This seems like a bit of a big stretch, but just hear me out.
I don't think it seems like a huge stretch, to be fair. We've been learning about the separation of souls for the longest time, but usually in thirds, right? But, I mean, still.
And also, my apologies, but it's about to get a little fanficky in here for a bit.
Okay.
Now, initially, I think Asmoday actually had a pretty positive view of her role and master, Phanes. I think she was pretty content with her job. But then she witnessed the incredible destruction of the War of Funerary Flame.
Yeah.
And although she did her best to save what little she couldn't save everyone or every memory. Over time, she grew disillusioned with her work and the futility of her efforts
A
to
bit of
protect and
survivor's
preserve
guilt.
human civilization, and she succumbed to melancholy. And one day, she caught sight of a shooting star, a spaceship that snuck through border security and landed in Nod Cry. Someone then exited that spaceship to survey the area. This is the Abyss Twin. And whether it was protocol or curiosity that drove her to do it, Asmoday then uplifted the Abyss Twin and locked them inside of one of Renova's Maranasati caskets, just like she would any other uplifted individual. But because the Abyss Twin was an outlander
Trying to think of timelines here while she's talking about this. I don't want to interrupt while she's cooking.
like she would any other uplifted individual. But because the Abyss Twin was an outlander that did not belong to this world, Asmoday moved them from the apathic interval to the cage of suchness, just like she did with the other outlander, the author of Vera's Melancholy. Now, the purpose of the Maranasati caskets is to strip the individuals of certain memories or desires by forcing them into a state of meditation. For native Tavatians, this is to ensure that they cannot receive a vision and thus bind themselves to the fate of the world. If that were to happen, they would no longer qualify as a living specimen and would have to leave the exhibit. For Outlanders, this is probably more of a safety protocol, a temporary holding cell until they eject them from the border of Tevat. Now at this point, I think Asmoday may have realized something about the Abyss Twin. Whether she noticed their unique constitution, like the ability to absorb an infinite amount of abyssal material, or whether she witnessed something within their memories that caught her attention while
I don't think it would necessarily be that, because wouldn't that... I doubt Asmoday could just look at the Traveler and know that about them. Unless she was pumping him with abyssal energy, which I also doubt, because that would mean she would have to do that with everybody on Tevat, basically. I really don't think so, but the second one is...
infinite amount of abyssal material, or whether she witnessed something within their memories that caught her attention while they were being erased by the casket, I'm not really sure.
I could imagine that. Genuinely.
But whatever happened, I do think it made Asmoday realize that this person was the same type of entity as her current master, Phanes. And that meant it was possible for this Outlander to dethrone them. Now, I know that sounds like a big claim, but we have to acknowledge the fact that Asmoday's new master is the Abyss Twin. We know this basically to be a fact because of what Malanta says in...
No, I vibe with this. Bro, I have literally been saying for the longest time, I don't think the shades, the heavenly principles, basically I feel like everything we know is not the full truth, which I think is kind of common knowledge at this point, right? We learn more and more about all of these different factions and different even roles in the game, and they suddenly become so different to us. Even the Abyss sibling. I feel like our thoughts of the Abyss sibling have changed so drastically from the beginning of the game to now, right? We start the game, it's like, oh my god, we gotta find her, and they'll be so happy to like escape with us again. And then we meet them and we will be reunited, and it's like, whoa. they're different now. Every time we meet them, they seem more and more distant. The Natlan quest specifically with the keys, I feel like could also be a clue, by the way, with the keys. Having the extra one, but that'll be yet to come. That'll probably get explained in 3 fucking years. That one specifically where the main twin was like, what does that have to do with us? And then the Abyss sibling was like, oh, it's only ever been about us. That was the realest I feel like the Abyss siblings been with us in a very long time, and I expect us to get more realism from them very soon, hopefully.
In the Temple of Space. And the primary goal of the Abyss Twin is to overthrow the heavenly principles. So we can only assume that Asmoday's goals are in line with the Abyss Twins. Now, as for the reason why Asmoday would even want to support this endeavor, well, I can think of 2 potential reasons. The first reason is that she might not believe Phanes even cares about humanity with how easily they destroy the disobedient ones like they did during the War of Funerary Flame. Destroying the humans that Asmodee has been protecting for so long makes her efforts feel pointless and futile, hence her melancholy. The second reason could be that during the
I do like that idea. Then I'm curious, though, because that would probably mean that we're not just inside one of her boxes the entire time, right? Teyvat is not just one of her bubbles, because if it was, does it really affect many things that are going on outside of that? There's so much left to answer, bro. Jesus Christ. Even though this game's been out for so long, there really is so many stones that are left unturned. It's crazy.
That Asmodee has been protecting for so long makes her efforts feel pointless and futile, hence her melancholy. The second reason could be that during the war, Asmodee came to understand that Teyvat didn't belong to Phanes or humanity.
Yep.
It belonged to the dragons.
Never
I know technically Asmodee would have been part of the fight against the dragons in the first place, not during the War of Funerary Flame, but before that. I think it was just during the Funerary War that it sank in, you know? And if this is the case, it makes her opening line of the irrigation of mankind ends now make a little bit more sense, because it would refer to humans stealing a planet that doesn't belong to them. But honestly, I can
No more colonizing.
argue both these cases and a couple more, so I'm not really gonna fuss about the reason so much, because most evidence in general just points to the fact that she believes Phanes needs to be replaced, so we're just gonna roll with that. Now, you would assume in order to get rid of a Descender, you would need a Descender yourself, right? And the Abyss Twin clearly is not a Descender, and I won't try to argue that they are or ever were. But the thing is, the only thing we know for certain about Descenders is that they need to have a will that rivals a world. And it seems strange to me that 2 twins wouldn't have the same level of will, you know?
Do you think the reason the Abyss Twin is kind of so off with us is by design, so that we still have the will to rival the world? Because I really feel like Aether only has that will because he wants him and his sister to escape. I feel like if the Abyss sibling wasn't a part of this, Aether probably wouldn't have the will to rival the world to get them both out. Traveler said to Columbina that he now considers Teyvat his home, but that doesn't matter. Reminds me of home is where Lumine is, right? Yeah, if the siblings isn't here, they would be enjoying their harem. But either way, I do feel like maybe that is one of the many reasons why Aether does have the will to rival the world. What if they die and the twins don't get to return to the Sea of Stars? I feel like that'd be a big fucking dumb move, to be honest, if both siblings died at the end of Genshin Impact 1. I don't think they'd do it. I don't think it makes sense.
So there has to be an additional component, and I think that additional component is compassion for the planet that they're trying to be a descender of. And that's based on a conversation that the Traveler had with Skirk when they asked her whether or not she was a descender, and she said no, but I guess I kind of could be. I'm paraphrasing a little, but you know. She left the possibility open that she could be one, but she isn't. And it's almost as if she isn't by choice.
Yeah.
So I think a Descender not only needs a very powerful will, but they also need to care about the planet and what happens to it. Asmodee may have known.
But did we give a damn when we were first considered a Descender as Aether? Did we care? I guess we experienced stuff before we as players started the game. Aether already experienced stuff, maybe enough to care that much. I don't think he gave that much of a damn about Teyvat. I think he cared more about his sister. I just don't see the evidence of it, except for him being asked to help and him helping. I feel like he probably started to care after Inazuma and at the start of Sumeru, for sure. We were fixing problems, but we weren't doing it out of the goodness of our own heart. Let's keep it a buck, right? Aether wasn't just like, I will help you. He was being asked. From what I could see, I feel like Aether at the beginning of the game wouldn't have cared more than for example, other people on Teyvat that were already protecting their nations, for example. But that's just me.
On that, or maybe she just wants to have a master that does care about the same thing she cares about.
True.
So if she wanted this new Outlander to be her new master, then she would need to get them to care about the world. But an outsider would have outside attachments, memories from their time living beyond the firmament. So I think Asmoday used the Maranasati casket to strip the Abyss Twin of all of their memories so that they would become a blank slate. And then she left them in Khaenri'ah, where the other gods would not notice them. That's why the twin wakes up in Khaenri'ah with no memories. And because they had no memories, they imprinted upon Khaenri'ah and came to love it as if it were their hometown.
Oh, that's crazy. Imprinting? For those of you that don't know, this is actually a very much real life thing. Typically not in people, though. It's usually in certain animals. I think ducks, for example, imprint. There was experiments that were done years ago in psychology. They would basically put like a rubber glove, for example, as the first thing a duck sees when it hatches, and they would consider that rubber glove their mother. Like they would literally swim up to it, and if they put it in water, they'd consider it their mom. Disney made a movie about this. Disney have made a movie about pretty much everything. But it's very interesting. It's very cool.
And while they learned to love the land and its people, they also grew to resent the heavenly principles for forsaking the people of Khaenri'ah.
Yeah,
but there was a flaw in Asmoday's plan.
Okay.
Because the Abyss Twin didn't arrive in Teyvat alone. Their sibling was still hibernating on board the spaceship, and the more time passed, the more the Abyss Twin's memories began to recover, and they longed to see their sibling. And then one night, an abyssal catastrophe struck Khaenri'ah, but the twin wasn't there to help because the only thing more important to them and their new home was their only remaining family. So they went to Nod Cry, found their spaceship, woke their sibling.
That was probably the scene you were talking about, right? That's where she recognized Ether. Yeah, I don't think she didn't know who he was. I think it was just she
only remaining
realized he was here.
family. So they went to Nod Cry.
Was that scene? Or am I high? Was that something different?
I found their spaceship, woke their sibling, and ran. Why they didn't take their spaceship? I don't know.
Good
maybe
point.
It was broken, or maybe Asmodee boxed it so they couldn't use it. Whatever the reason, they eventually reached the firmament. And Asmodee, frustrated, revealed herself, determined to try her plan again with her chosen master. And that meant getting rid of their distracting sibling, at least temporarily, because she can't kill them. So she sent the Abyss Twin to Sumeru, where they dealt with.
You know, this part is very interesting because she cubes our powers separately. I feel like we used all of our power to try stop her here. I feel like this was all of our power to try and get our sister back, right? Try stop her from taking our sister. And she imprisoned all of our power. We're obviously going around collecting it now. Do you think we'll just find the power of light, or like the knowledge of it at least, just in a cube somewhere eventually?
Because she can't kill
Because it's separate. That was one.
them. So
It's
she
different.
sent the Abyss Twin to Sumeru, where they dealt with the fallout of the Cataclysm while the Traveler was put to sleep, potentially in a Maranasati casket, for 500 years. Now let's pause this story for a second because something really important happens at this time. And that important something is the creation of Paimon.
Creation? Oh, this could be interesting, because if this is the point where Asmodee got rid of her melancholy, or tried to, I guess, it wouldn't necessarily be the fact that Paimon is the melancholy, but it could be that she removed like her whimsy, you know? She removed her joy and whimsy, which was a form of preservation to preserve it in one way, shape, or form. She probably knew that she herself could have been corrupted, and then Paimon is her joy and whimsy, I guess. What else would you call it?
Hear me out. Paimon's origins are extremely vague and highly contested, and so is her age. Paimon seems to believe that she's less than 400 years old, but the Melazines are convinced that she's a lot older than that.
Yeah.
And Melazines are known for seeing things a bit differently. Some might even say they can only see
The truth of the world.
And in my
Yep.
opinion, if we are to accept the Melazines' claim that Paimon is like a rainbow balloon with a string extending into the sky, which is something widely accepted throughout the theorist community,
Yep.
and often used as a means to connect her to Phanes, then we should
I paint it more towards a moon, to be fair, or even a sun. Hence the like inverted omni element symbol as well, the light I don't know. Nobody knows.
believe the Melazines when they imply that Paimon is over 400 years old. Assuming that's true,
I'm so intrigued about this Project Moongazer stuff, though.
her time of birth would be around the time of the Cataclysm, potentially. Now, two of the most popular theories regarding Paimon's origins claim she's either a fragment of Phanes or a fragment of Asmoday, and I think regardless of which one you subscribe to, it makes the most sense for Paimon to be around 500 years old because that's the moment when Phanes went to sleep and Asmoday went missing. Now, I can personally argue both sides here, and in fact, I'm going to, but not in the way that you'd think, because I don't think this is an either-or situation. I think it's possible, if not likely, that Paimon is related to both Phanes and Asmoday.
Okay, I'm very curious how she's going to connect both of these. Inverted Omni would be the moon, the reflection of the sun. Exactly. I'm thinking more so Ether, the main twin. I'm going to say Ether because I play Ether. I feel like Ether is there to represent the sun. He's a star that's probably going to ascend to the new heights, take the throne in the sky, basically become the sun, right? And I do feel like Paimon is likely going to be a reflection. I really like my theory. I really don't think it's going to come true at this point based on the new information that we get. I really like the theory that we are going to create a new world, and Ether taking the throne in the sky is going to be the sun, right? It's not necessarily going to become a sun, but take the throne in the sky of a new world kind of makes me think that Paimon becomes the new moon, the governess of that, and then we're going to use the genetic data bank and everything else that we find up on the journey to create a new world, probably with Zhongli, the Saritsa, because the contract to end all contracts is probably to end all vision contracts, and then they can become the government of the new world. Lo and behold, the only ones remaining are actually not as bad as we thought, something like that. I don't know. I just like to think that that could be the case, but it's very likely not going to be the case.
Here's how I think this plays out.
It's my
Generally
one
speaking,
crack
when
theory.
we think of Phanes, we're actually thinking of the Phanes that was born from the cosmic egg of Ananke and Kronos Ion. And since that Phanes was a god of creation, it makes sense if Tevat's version of Phanes is also a god of creation. So this connection makes sense, right? Plus, it's not like there's any other god named Phanes, right? Wrong! There is another god named Phanes, a Gnostic one too. There's the Eon Proto-Phanes. And I think Proto-Phanes deserves a bit more attention than he's been getting because in the same way Genshin's Phanes has 4 shades of themselves, Proto-Phanes is a combination of his 4 luminary aspects.
Shades?
Luminaries are kind of like subdivisions of an eon. It's like having a circle that you split into 4 quadrants. Each quadrant is a luminary, but the circle is the eon, and you need all 4 quadrants of the circle to make up the circle.
Wait, is this still Genshin?
But each quadrant can also exist independently. This is a characteristic that the other Phanes, the one born of Ananke and Kronos Ion, lacks. And this idea of a god being made up of 4 lesser gods is pretty similar to Genshin's moon goddesses, right? Like, there were originally only 3 moon goddesses, but when they combined their power, they formed a 4th moon goddess. So what we thought were 3 goddesses was actually 4 goddesses. It's the
Bro, we're going to combine Ether, Lumine, and Paimon 3 to make the 4th Megatron. Wait, no, because there's already Metatron. But Metatron's not in the game yet. We're going to be Megatron.
rule of 3 that's actually 4. And given the fact that the followers of the Crimson Moon, like Arlecchino, boast a plethora of similarities to Asmoday's Watchers, and the fact that the Trilunar Authority embodies the same 4 concepts governed by the Shades, I think we can safely assume that the Shades and the Moons operate in similar ways. That is to say, if 3 moons can combine their powers to form a 4th power, which awakens a new appropriate host in Columbina, then 4 Shades should be able to combine their powers to create a 5th power
I really think they're on the dark side of the moon, bro. I can't wait for this next patch.
and awaken an appropriate host by the name of Phanes. But the big problem we have with Phanes right now is that one of the Shades, Asmoday, is missing, and has been missing for exactly the same length of time that Phanes has been apparent.
See this part here? I reckon Renova and Piero could have made a bargaining deal here, dude. I'm so for real. I don't know what it would be, but I think this motherfucker's smarter than we give him credit for. I really, really do.
Apparently sleeping. And I really think it's possible that Phanes isn't waking up because Asmoday is missing. Because I would think that unless there's
Also, yeah, she hot as balls.
something restricting Phanes from waking up, burning down Irminsul, which was enforcing their oh-so-important fate system, should have woken them up. And as far as we know, it didn't. Now, I do think there's one really important difference between the shades and the moons, and that difference is individuality. As far as we know, the 3 moons are individuals and not aspects of Columbina, nor are they considered aspects of Nibelung. But the shades are described as being part of Phanes, as if Phanes split themselves into 4 pieces.
Should make
and
sense.
This is really interesting to me because there is only one instance that I can find in the whole game where Phanes could have appeared alongside one of their shades. In every other incident, Phanes appears alone, or the shades appear without Phanes. Like,
When the hell could this have been?
Phanes fought the dragons alone, according to Before Sun and Moon.
Yeah.
It was only after their victory that they created 4 shining shades of themselves. And notably, during the War of Funerary Flame, Phanes is mentioned as fighting Nibelung, but the shades aren't mentioned anywhere. And that's what got me thinking of the 4 shades being 4 parts of Phanes. Plus, the shades are also known as shadows in Chinese, and that can reference countless things, such as the shades or spirits that walk along the river Styx in Greek mythology, or the Shut or shadow self of Egyptian mythology, or the concept
Egyptian mythology is so fucking lit, dude. I'm sorry. I used to love that shit when I was growing up.
of the cognitive shadow found in Jungian psychology. But no matter which way you look, these shadows all have one thing in common. They are all either containing a key aspect of the person they belong to, or they are a reflection of that person, and in that way are a part of that person.
Yep.
Which is part of the reason why I'm so convinced that all 4 shades need to come together to unlock Phanes. But okay, if the 4 shades
I think that makes sense.
are a part of Phanes, then Paimon can actually be a part of Asmoday and still be a part of Phanes, because Asmoday is a part of Phanes, right?
Wait, so she's going to be the emergency food?
It's the same way that Luonatar is part of Columbina. But just because she can be a part of Asmoday doesn't mean that she is a part of Asmoday. And honestly, there are many compelling cases against the idea, like this one by Gonerbits, which argues that Paimon is a fragment of Phanes instead. What I actually like and find funny about this theory is that we have a lot of overlap in the evidence and references that we're using, but we're still drawing opposite conclusions, which I find really fascinating. So this is a great thread to read as a counter argument to my theory, so I'll leave a link in the description for you.
Huge.
But if there are so
Okay.
many compelling cases against the idea that Paimon is part of Asmoday, why insist that she is part of Asmoday? Well, in my
Wait, true. I did want to read the post. Hold on. Paimon is a piece of the Heavenly Principle's heart, plus how the Archons foreshadow their story. There were a lot of theories. Oh, this is the link in the description. This is going to be a long one. Maybe we'll give this a read afterwards. Sorry, this is going to be a long one. Let's just continue.
Is a lot of
My
overlap
bad.
in the evidence and references that we're using, but we're still drawing opposite conclusions, which I find really fascinating. So this is a great thread to read as a counter argument to my theory, so
Okay.
I'll leave a link in the description for you.
Huge.
But if there are so many compelling cases against the idea that Paimon is part of Asmoday, why insist that she is part of Asmoday? Well, in my opinion, it really has to do with Asmoday's melancholia and Hoyul's repeating theme of imaginary friends. I promise this will make sense in a bit, just stick with me.
Sorry, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Is imaginary friends really a recurring theme? Timmy? True, actually. Yeah, fuck. Timmy with the Ruin God. Fremine with Thelxie. True, actually. 3 times in 6 years. You know what? Fair enough.
During the
Let's
Phantasm
go into
of
it with that in mind.
Imaginary Friends. I promise this will make sense in a bit, just stick with
Isn't
me.
Oz technically an imaginary friend official? No, 'cause, I don't think so. Everyone can see him. He's more of an actual... Actually, I guess we recently did kind of get lore. That was in a Little Hexencircle quest, I think. Not the Little Hexencircle, the actual Hexarai quest for official. Yeah, wasn't Oz an imaginary friend to begin with, but then she kind of brought him to life? Yeah, he was an imaginary friend, but she was able to make him real. True. God damn. Okay, never mind. I just had to rejog my memory on that. That's fair. Yeah.
During the Phantasmal Pals event, we got to play with the Little Hexencircle and their imaginary friends, and we even got to help them reunite Homura with her lost imaginary friend, Popcorn. Now, Homura was a young adult who was extremely excited to land her first job. This was her big break, an opportunity to make a name for herself and live out her childhood dreams. But the adult world was unforgiving and exhausting, and before she knew it, her job stripped her of her youthful enthusiasm, driving her to a state of melancholy.
Yeah.
Eventually, the melancholy overtook her, and she just gave up believing things could ever get better. And it was her imaginary friend Popcorn who reminded her of
Never the case, by the way. Things can always get better.
why she wanted this job in the first place, and what it was like to look at tomorrow and not feel depressed. And you know, imaginary friends in Genshin have always kind of confused me. Like, I never really understood what Hoyoverse was trying to say whenever they brought them up.
Me either.
Because, like, the very first time we encountered the concept of an imaginary friend was back in Vendi's story quest. And I can't say it made a lot of sense back then in context, but I think I get it now.
I forgot about that. Oh my god, I did.
Imaginary friends represent childhood. They're the embodiment of that carefree feeling of waking up every day, eager to learn something new or do something fun just for the heck of it.
I'll be honest, dude, I always saw the imaginary friends back then, I think, as memories from ley lines rather than actually imaginary friends. Mainly because of the color of them, I guess, but I don't know.
They represent a time when things were simpler, a time when joy came naturally, a time when being optimistic felt easy. Growing up means confronting the harsh realities of the real world, and every day we have to choose whether to let those hardships beat us down and force us into melancholy.
Yeah, because it's quite similar to the stuff that we see in the Night, well, in Natlan, not in the Night Kingdom, but in the overworld as well.
But the best defense we have against melancholy is joy, and the purest form of joy is found in memories of our childhood. So tapping into our inner child, so to speak, is what encourages us to play and laugh, and that's really important because that joy is what—
Wait, so Paimon could be her whimsy then, right? Paimon could be Asmoday's inner child, basically.
Feeds into our hope that things get better, and it gives us the strength to face tomorrow. But this is kind of what I feel like Paimon is for Asmoday. She's that inner child that Asmoday lost sight of when she succumbed to melancholy and decided to steel herself against the harsh realities of the world. I think that it was around the time of the Cataclysm that Asmoday finally suppressed her inner child so much that it left her completely. And somehow it wound up deep in the ocean until the Traveler fished it up. And it's not lost on—
Can I just say as well, by the way, you know, like the whole burning of Verminsoul took a long time to come to fruition? We still ain't never seen this. Is this is this ever going to happen? I don't know, genuinely, because they've never addressed it like they did with the Irminsul stuff, but we ain't never seen this. This is something that happened in, was this Fontaine or earlier? In like a teaser, and it just never happened ever.
In the ocean until the Traveler fished it up. And it's not lost on me that this is the exact same situation that Skirk found herself.
Yeah, in a Zuma teaser. Jesus, that's crazy. Oh my god.
While she was once young and full of optimism, she suppressed her childhood memories and feelings so that she could become numb to the real world and just focus on her goals.
Yep.
But forcing herself to forget her childhood memories was making her weaker. And it was only after reuniting with her inner child that she found new strength. And like I said in the Traveler's character story, it says the Keeper, or rather the Sustainer, is fading. Like Skirk, she's getting weaker. And I really don't think this is too much of a coincidental comparison to make. Because, like, Skirk is an Outlander trained by Sertology, who is the abyssal equivalent of the Space Shade. That feels really intentional to me, you know? And I've mentioned this a few times before, but Asmodee doesn't bear the same symbolism as the other shades do. She most notably lacks both a halo and a triquetra in her design.
Dude, true, she doesn't have a circlet.
But Paimon has both, while also having some design elements that match the architecture of the Temple of Space.
Dude, how did I never freaking notice that?
To me, at least.
Compared to the, how did I never notice that? Why did I never pick up on the fact that she doesn't wear a freaking circlet, bro? Maybe I thought it just, you know, got sucked up by space like the rest of her hair.
Asmodee's lack of halo and triquetra is symbolic of her casting off her attachment to Phanes and her former role as a shade. It represents her suppressing her younger, naive self in an effort to prepare for the challenges that she must face and the sacrifices she may have to make. Now, you can argue that triquetras just aren't associated with the theme of space, but
she is indeed becoming weaker in Snezhnaya. I wonder if this means Asmodee is trying to reabsorb her literal emergency food. Oh, God.
That's not entirely true. I mean, sure, a four-pointed star is more indicative of space-time vectors and directionality than a triquetra is, but the space cube within the Temple of Space is white with a triquetra on it. So it references Paimon more than Asmodee. And I know a lot of people are going to point out the fact that in TCG, the Omni element is also a white triquetra symbol with a holographic rainbow effect, and even that supports this idea. If each element is a color of the rainbow, then the rainbow is a form that contains all other forms.
Yeah.
That's effectively a type of Metatron
Yeah,
cube.
just like Megatron, just like she was saying in the beginning somewhere around here, with the stars basically containing all the other shapes. That is very true.
Also note that Metatron was God's scribe, and Paimon takes notes for the Traveler, the one who has the—
Wait, I have a thought here. We were talking about earlier Nibelung, right? Nibelung didn't create Teyvat, but he was born alongside Teyvat. You know, like how people keep referencing Nibelung as the dragon of shadow or whatever the fuck it was? If Teyvat is meant to be that star itself, right? If Teyvat is meant to house everything inside of it, would that not mean it should have had to have been created by a being of light to begin with? If Nibelung was born at the same time as Teyvat and he is the embodiment of darkness or shadow, could it have been like a dragon of light that originally created Teyvat and then it cast a shadow at the same time, which was Nibelung? Nibelung was a light dragon before the Abyss. Well, he was perceived as a light dragon in the murals, yes, but we know how much murals can actually be kind of misrepresentations as well. You're right, he very much was. He was represented as like a light form of dragon, for sure. I always do like to think, what would have actually created Teyvat at that point? Aren't all dragons elements or light-based by default? Light-based and elements can be one thing, but that doesn't mean they are born of... They are all of light element, right? I had the thought quite a while ago of like the dragons. What if they are all elemental beings? Like they are all light and they just hyper-focus their light energy onto one aspect of the light prism? Hence, like evolving into a specific type of dragon, like the Dendro Dragon Sovereign or Hydro Dragon Sovereign. Like you say, maybe the light and dark dragon are the same thing. Maybe Nibelung was the dragon of light and ended up succumbing to the darkness. That could definitely be the case, but then who made Teyvat? Don't know. And then the other dragon sovereigns are probably the fragmentations of Nibelung, right? Kind of like we have the Archons. I like to think that that could be the case with the dragon sovereigns as well.
Potential to ascend to the throne of God as the fourth descender. And we also have to note that Paimon didn't get cubed and warped to the apathic interval during the Temple of Space quest. And I think the reason for this is because she's actually the relinquished memories of Asmoday.
Which could be very cool. And it could also, that would actually make sense as well, by the way, as to why Barbeloth couldn't scry her fate properly, and the things that she did see didn't look very good.
She's not a person who needs to give something up. She's a thing that was given up. And they kind of allude to this in the quest dialogue in a kind of roundabout way when they say, well, maybe Paimon's head is just empty, so there's nothing she has to give up. If she's the thing that was given up, there's nothing she has to give up. Now, is there?
True.
And as I mentioned in part 1, there are actually 2 endings to Vera's melancholy. One of them ends with Vera alone in her hometown waiting for her happiness to return to her. And the other, happier one, ends with Ike hunting down another version of himself so that they may become a single person. And I think in a loose allegorical way, each ending mirrors a possible path that Asmoday could take.
I could see that.
If Asmoday refuses to embrace her imaginary friend, so to speak, she will end up like the Vera in the bad ending. She'll be stuck in her temple waiting for a brighter future that may never arrive while she wastes away to nothing. But if she accepts her inner child as part of her once again, the way that Skirk and Homura and Ike did, then maybe she, like Ike, can boldly declare that she loves the world and everything in it from the heart of the world in the Temple of Space.
Yep.
But when we talk about fusing with another version of yourself or accepting a part of yourself that you once rejected, we should probably revisit that concept of the shadow self found in Jungian psychology, because that opens up a couple of weird but cool narrative possibilities.
Ooh, shadow self, again with maybe Nibelung?
See, Jung believed that accepting or merging with one's shadow came with risks. For a shadow once assimilated can overpower or even overwrite the ego self, the conscious self.
Ooh,
in other words, by attempting to accept your shadow as part of yourself, you can lose yourself to the shadow. Durin is actually a pretty good example of this, because Mini Durin is essentially the inner child Big Durin never had, and when the two fused, Big Durin was overwritten, or at least they were overpowered. Now you can actually argue that Big Durin is
It also does fight back, though, if we remember in Durin's quest, kind of.
The shadow in this case. But regardless, in my opinion, it doesn't actually matter which one is the shadow and which one is the original ego, because both have the power to play the role of either the shadow or the ego.
True.
The ego is just what we call the winner. Now, you can't really talk about Durin without talking about alchemy, because that is how Big Durin was made, and his source material was actually abyssal material, Nigredo. And this gets really interesting because Carl Jung was a big proponent of spiritual alchemy. And in Jungian spiritual alchemy, the magnum opus is a means to make yourself whole by accepting and integrating all aspects of yourself into a singular self. So it's the process by which one fuses safely with the shadow self.
Yeah.
This alchemical process is actually what happened when Albedo forcefully fused Mini Durin with Big Durin. Albedo fused the shadow self with the ego. And this process of achieving the magnum opus of spiritual alchemy, especially within the realm of Jungian psychology, requires the same 4 processes that physical or hermetic alchemy does: nigredo, albedo, citrinitas, and rubido. And while this physical hermetic nigredo refers to the dark soil or source material or clay, as we talked about earlier, the spiritual nigredo refers to one's melancholy. And Big Durin, who was made of nigredo, was certainly melancholic. In that context, it is very interesting that Barbaloth calls the Abyss, or rather Nigredo,
Unchosen fates.
resentful. It's quite likely she's picking up on its connection to melancholy, the black bile or the negative emotions of the self. And it's these dark waves of emotion that needs to be tempered by using the processes of spiritual alchemy, moving one from the nigredo or melancholic stage to the rubido stage, the stage of elation or joy. That's what Mini Durin was to Big Durin, and that's what I think Paimon is to Asmoday.
Dude, I subscribe to that theory. I think that's kind of cool. Thing is, I subscribe to like 4 different Paimon theories at this point. One of them's got to be true, surely. Your brain's not braining. Yeah, Ashikai, can get a bit confusing sometimes. Luckily, I'm kind of locked in on this one. It is making a lot of sense to me.
She's Asmoday's missing joy, her inner child, and her ability to love.
Yeah.
So I think it's very possible that Asmodee has the potential to become, or at least replace, Phanes. And this might even be a necessity because according to Nouvelette's character stories, after the War of Funerary Flame, Phanes lost some of their important functions. And I'm starting to wonder if that function was the capacity to love Tevat and all the people in it. You remember how I said being a descender may require you to care about or love the world that you're in?
Yeah.
Well, if Phanes, as the first descender, doesn't love anymore, then they've lost their descender power. Now, I think that if Paimon eventually does...
That is very... that is interesting. But it's also like at the same time, bro, do we really think the third descender... What? Oh, God. Oh, God. I don't know. I don't... It's making my head hurt now because I'm thinking of all the other fucking descenders and what we know about them, which isn't much, to be fair, but...
does merge with Asmodee, if she is the inner child and the shadow self, then she has the potential to be like Durin and become the true self of Asmodee. So Asmodee would become Paimon. And because Asmodee is one of the shadow selves of Phanes alongside the other 3, I think it's very possible that if those 4 shades combine, Paimon would become the front-facing ego self of the new Phanes.
She could have become the Hersher of ego, bro.
Their capacity to love Tevat. In recent quests especially, Paimon has been plagued by this anxiety that she's useless. And to some extent she is. I mean, she can't really fight, she's not extremely smart, she doesn't have any real special powers to speak of. But we can say the same thing about our inner child and our ability to love and hope and be optimistic. Those feelings and memories don't give us any special powers, and yet we still value them above everything else.
True.
I think I'm going to start calling these closing segments unwanted encores because I still have more to say and nowhere to say them. Like, technically, I've mentioned this in another video, but Asmodee is named after the demon Asmodeus, but Asmodeus was the demon of love, lust, and revenge. Our Asmodee only appears to have the revenge aspect, so it'd be very fitting if Paimon had the love aspect. Similarly, Asmodeus is known for having been trapped in a box wrapped in chains and buried at the bottom of the ocean. Where did we get Paimon? At the bottom of the ocean. And Asmodee also guided a prince through the 7 layers of hell, the same way Paimon is guiding the traveler through the 7 regions of Tevat plus Nautcry. Also, while writing this and mulling over the concept of Tethata in Hoyo games, I was reminded of the cocoon of finality from Honkai Impact and how it embodied the same concept of Tethata. Fittingly, the main character of Honkai Impact, Kiana, starts off as the Hersher of the Void.
Yep.
The Hersher of the Void is the likely origin point of Asmodee, at least conceptually, because Asmodee has the power title and shares a lot of her design elements with the Hersher of the Void. Now, throughout her journey, Kiana battles with this sort of alternate personality that she has, this Hersher of the Void. It's almost like a shadow self, if you will. And after she'd conquered it, she was able to embrace the cocoon of finality and become the Hersher of finality. And finality in this case is...
We were talking about this earlier.
totality, or Tethata. Now, Paimon also shares a lot of Kiana's childish, optimistic, and hungry personality traits while also looking a lot like her as well, at least as she was a toddler.
Yeah.
And when you combine all those aspects, you can kind of see how Hoyo could be attempting a remixed version of a Kiana-esque story here. And there is so much more to this, but I'm just gonna have to do like a full-blown Enochian deep dive at some point. Also, apologies if I sound weird in this video. I've been very congested and I keep losing my voice.
Literally could not tell.
So it's been a bit of a struggle to record for long periods. So today especially, I really want to say thank you for everyone for being so patient and supportive during this time where I've had these long gaps of nothing to share. Your support really does mean the world to me. So thank you for supporting. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for watching. And please, please, please drink your fluids, wash your hands, and do not let the sickness find you. It sucks.
Hell yeah,
One victim
man.
is enough. Wishing you all the best, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.
Oh, man. Hey, that was a good video, dude. That was a very good video. I do like a lot of those theories. I really, really enjoy the whole thing of Paimon being the inner child of Asmoday, basically. First time I've kind of seen that. And here's the link if you want to check it out. For the YouTube watchers, link is in the first line of the description right below. Go check out Ashikai, bro. Go check out Ashikai.